In this next session, we will focus on two key areas where Sri Lanka can leverage its strategic location and proximity to India to achieve sustainable economic growth: maritime transport and logistics and renewable energy. Sri Lanka has been a regional maritime hub uniquely positioned on major east-west shipping routes. Today, we'll explore how Sri Lanka can capitalize on opportunities in the maritime transport and logistics center. On the renewable energy front, India is making significant strides towards becoming a global clean energy leader. This session will look into the potential for grid interlinking and renewable energy collaboration between Sri Lanka and India, with experts from Sri Lanka and Bhutan sharing their insights. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. And you may also please take your seat on stage as I call upon your name. Mr. Ramesh David, CEO, South Asia Gateway Terminals. Mr. Tamal Roy, President, J.M. Baxi Group. Mr. Karma Shawan, Chief Engineer, Energy Strategy and Planning Division, Minister of Energy, Bhutan, who will be joining us virtually. Dr. Pradeep Pereira, former Principal Energy Specialist, Asian Development Bank. Mr. Vishwanath Daluwata, Group Management Committee Member, Hayleys Advantis. And this session will be co-moderated by Ms. Dashma Karunaratne, Chief Commercial Officer, Colombo West International Terminal, Mr. Damitha Kumarasinghe, Director General, Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka. I would like to invite all panelists and co-moderators on stage, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the gulab jamun. I'm excited to be here, and thank you, Verité Research, for giving me this opportunity. So the panel was introduced. I will start with my first question to Ramesh. Sri Lanka has a long history in trade. The first reference of pure cinnamon is in the book of Proverbs, mentioned way back in 1500 BC. Our spices, gems, through various networks, both land and maritime routes, reached faraway lands, decorated crowns, thrones, and was used as incense in temples. Today in the 21st century, with the population that we have in Sri Lanka, our export and our exports may not be the only thing that will sustain our economy. Our God-given strategic location on the main east-west shipping route has given us a competitive advantage for our ports. Our proximity to the Indian subcontinent helps us to connect the region with the rest of the world. Since the infusion of private investment at Port of Colombo, 25 years ago, the port has grown, if you look at a compound annual growth rate, at about 15%. Last year, Port of Colombo did 7.7 million TEUs, grew at 12%, and the volume that the port secured was the best in its history. So my first question, Ramesh, is what have we done right to gain a competitive advantage, and what does Sri Lanka need to do to sustain this advantage?
Thanks, Dash. So I think in terms of what we did right was a fairly simple thing of realizing possibly 35 years ago that we had a God-given advantage in terms of location. And not only was it astride the main sea route, but it was also at the southern tip of India, which ultimately would be the engine that would cause us to grow. So from the late 80s, when Jaya Container Terminal became firstly the Queen Elizabeth Quay was converted to a container terminal, and then the Jaya Container Terminal was developed. And thereafter the absolute, with the benefit of hindsight, the foresight of the government in the late 90s to take the port to the next level with SAGT, and thereafter, belatedly again with CICT, and albeit a little bit behind the curve, but keeping on adding capacity, because with the advent of container shipping that relies on, particularly on the east-west route, which is the most dominant seaborne trade lane in the world, the whole hub and spoke concept with every increasing ship size, the method of growth for, the method of engagement and development for shipping lines was the big ships on the main routes and being fed over that. So Colombo, I think, had some good examples to go by. Singapore was a good example. Hong Kong was a great example. And Dubai was not really an example at that time because they had not developed. But the Port of Colombo added capacity simply because transshipment doesn't belong anywhere. It is a purely capacity-led business. You have to create the capacity to stimulate the demand. And that is evident not only in Colombo, but in every major hub around the world. Singapore and Malaysia and everything are examples. So I think at a basic level, the development of capacity, at the next level, that capacity was developed at a much more efficient level than what existed. So that capacity, when SAGT came on stream, compared to the best terminals in the world, the productivity levels. So shipping lines were getting used to the fact that they could then have a reliable service here. CICT came along, did the same thing. Hopefully CWIT will come along and do the same thing, and then ECT, whether it will do the same thing or not in the current context is debatable, but the capacity, the pipeline of capacity is clearly visible, and that's the second thing that we did right. The third thing, of course, is understand that it was, the hub and spoke model was dependent on providing services to shipping lines as well, lines and feeders, and creating a seamless flow. So I think if we take the big difference between why India took so long to start doing transshipment and Colombo was that the whole process, that onerous customs process was taken out of transshipment entirely. So today it flows seamlessly. There is no intervention by any local authority on transshipment cargo. And whatever intervention happens, it is all pre-cleared and post-cleared, so there's no documentation or anything that happens in between. Now it doesn't seem important, but it is critical in view of the fact that that is the way the world-class hubs operate. So I think those are some of the things that have worked for us, and going forward, the pipeline of capacity that is now visible, I think is also a good thing.
Okay, thanks, Romesh. My next question is to Vish. Hayleys has a strong presence in multiple verticals here in Sri Lanka, as well as the region and beyond. So as a port user, what does Sri Lanka need to do to provide that superior product and service to provide a best-in-class service for the maritime community?
So I think port users can be, there are multiple port users, so let's look at it. So I would like to say that, look, one is ultimately the principals, the shipping line is a primary user, and then you would have like end customers such as the consignees and shippers of the gateway side of the terminal, as well as the ultimate consignees and shippers of the transshipment countries, the origins and the final destinations. Right? So looking at it from a carrier's perspective, ultimately it comes down to firstly the stability of the port itself, because you would be planning your networks not for a short term, but the network would be put in place for a longer term. So you would need the port to function smoothly and efficiently over a long period of time without kind of disrupting the operations of the network, because it would ultimately reflect on the service of those carriers. Then would come the cost of calling a port, and that would not only be in terms of tariffs or as such, but overall the total cost of calling a port, such as particularly if you take in the context of the current situation of really high charter rates, which has prevailed, except for a very small period of time, which has prevailed since COVID. The deviation, the port stays, all matter a lot because these vessels, per day charter hires are very, very high. So then how much of deviation, how much of time is spent, not only at the quay, but also from time of arrival to time of being able to sail. So that holistic picture of the cost of a port call becomes very important because that will really impact on the cost of a service and ultimately on a carrier's profitability. Thereafter, looking at it from a transshipment perspective, the connectivity, which Ramesh also mentioned, the access to the networks, and also the stability of that network. And once that's in place, the relative ease of a call to the port, how easy are the formalities in terms of handling the vessel, is the crew at ease in terms of the formalities or the authorities and so on. So if you take the Port of Colombo, there are at least 4 authorities that get on board the vessel every time they call, every time a ship calls, right? So, and as we grow as a port, the question is it feasible to have all these people onboarding, coming on board the vessel every time a ship berths, because we would expect multiple vessels to be berthing at the same time, right? And of course, the quayside productivity, which we have done a good job in, and I think most of our terminals are world-class in that. And thereafter, with regard to what is expected by the end users, the shippers and the consignees, the ability to take the containers out quickly in terms of your domestic cargo, the ability to get your containers in fast and efficiently. If you take, for example, if you take a port like Rotterdam, which is really advanced through technology, it's considered that the average time of a import clearance is 30 minutes, right? And they do that through scanning, okay? And if you take Singapore, the number of containers actually examined is only 10%. Everything else goes out through scanners. So that really works towards create that efficiency for that end user of the port. Then when it comes to end users in those transshipment countries or the origins of transshipment, then what are the logistics facilities, the value-added services that we give from the port itself, whether it is MCC or simple value additions. As such, are we able to offer that kind of service on a world-class basis? So those would actually be drivers to entice cargo owners to consent towards moving more and more cargo over the Port of Colombo. So I would say, given those, the perspectives of the principals or the carrier, as well as the carrier's customer, I think both those factors have to be addressed by a port if we want to continue to keep our position and develop it.
Thanks, Vish. Ramesh also mentioned about in the transshipment, the footloose transshipment business, how important capacity is. So in terms of port infrastructure, we all know there is development, there's expansion. So in the next 2-3 years, if maybe about 7 million TEU capacity gets added to the Port of Colombo, there are certain services that need to be enhanced in terms of tugboats and, the rudiments of getting a ship to come to the port and, turning it around. Because while we bring all this automation and productivity, and as you mentioned, all the terminals have set new benchmarks for productivity, right? But these factors can be pulling us back. So as a port user, what would be like maybe 3 key result areas that we need to focus on in the backdrop of expansion in capacity, in infrastructure, maybe road, all of that, yes. But in addition to that, within the port, maybe a port community system.
Yeah, so I think digitalization is a very important aspect. When we look at from a quayside perspective, the interactions between the terminals and the shipping lines itself is world-class, and we are on par with anybody else in any port in the world. But behind that, the interactions for cargo clearance, documentation, submission, going into the customs process, and so on, we have so many bottlenecks, and we can see the kind of issues that are felt even now in terms of import clearance. So, as I mentioned, so the other ports in the world are using scanners, using technology to really drive those processes forward. So we would need to really get our single window port community system, etc., going to make it happen. I mean, we've been talking about it for ever so long, but you know, and there are world-class models already in place in different places, right? Then our navigation side really needs to be on par. Because, as I said, it's all about how quickly the ship can turn around. So we cannot be, you know, if we have 3 terminals, which may become 4 or 5, we need to be doing, our ship cannot wait for 2 or 3 hours. It will affect the ship as well as the terminal. You cannot idle. So we need to have those resources in place. We need to be able to safely navigate the channel so that the ships move quickly. Now, a third point would be all the carriers have pledged a lot of, pledged to be carbon neutral by 2050 at the most, right? So from a scope 3 perspective, ports comes into play in that journey. So that's an area we need to move. So if you look at India or Singapore, they've all kind of published what their journey is going to be and what is expected from their service providers. So that's another part that we also need to now really start focusing on. I know that some of the terminals are taking their initiatives, but then there needs to be a holistic approach from the Port of Colombo itself, right? So there might be, I would like to touch on a 4th aspect as well, which, especially given the amount of ships that we will expect, our capacity and the capability in terms of disaster management, right? So that's what I would say, the things that we would need to really look at.
Thanks, Vish. So Port of Colombo is the most connected port in the region. In Q3, it was ranked 9th most connected by Drury. However, the latest release, I found out that we have dropped to 12th in terms of connectivity. So we were the 9th most connected in the region, but now we've dropped to the 12th position. So Romesh, what holds us back from strengthening our competitive advantage in terms of connectivity? We discussed capacity connectivity, but why is there fluctuation? And how do we sustain this or improve it? While, for example, JNPT, I think is held at around 16th, I think, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't get too hung up on these numbers in terms of indices, but the connectivity is a factor of how many services you have on how many trade routes. When Sri Lanka moves from 9 to 12, probably 1 or 2 services moved away for a period. It's an indication of the connectivity of the port. The only thing that has held Sri Lanka back in the last 10 years has been our lack of capacity. CICT came into full operation in 2014. It was nearing capacity by 2016. A government in 2017 called for bids for the ECT. 9 major consortiums from around the world bid for it, applied for it. But the process was repeatedly scuttled over and over again. And then we've had false starts ever since then. So what we are actually talking about today in terms of the 3.5 million TUs that CWIT will bring and the 3.5 million TUs that ECT will bring when completed should actually, they will end up happening in the same time frame, but the development should have taken place, the first development 8 years ago. So in terms of the transshipment volumes, there's nothing other than capacity that has held us back, or lack of capacity.
Lack of capacity, yes. So in the last 5 years, compound annual growth rate in terms of throughput was kind of stagnated. It's actually at 1%. So currently, the terminals that are operating, I would say, perhaps is at full capacity. and may not be at its optimum capacity, because when a terminal is at full capacity, yes, they will do improvements to the cranes, gate automation, and all these land-side disciplines will be brought in to make sure that the quayside efficiency is improved. But we need to add capacity not by doing activities as such, but actually in terms of building a port, enhancing capacity. So I think that's a very good point that Ramesh made, and we need to collaborate to ride this wave. That's the name of this conference also. So about riding the wave, Tamal, throughput of India's containerized volume grew from 20 million to 22, and as we speak, as the financial year ends, we expect it to be around 25 million, few more days to go. Yeah, so could you elaborate the future trajectory of India in terms of ports and logistics? And of course, we are looking at how we can ride the wave, or Sri Lanka can complement this growth.
Okay. I don't think I'm very competent to be able to say how Sri Lanka could ride the wave. I'm sure there are experts on this side. But I can talk about the experiences that we've had in India. So we've had a very robust PPP policy, which has had its hits and misses. But from every miss, we've learned over the last 25 years. And probably the PPP policy of the port sector has now in its 5th or its 6th iteration, and it's just got better and better. When I say better and better, it becomes more private sector or investor friendly, right? Even an investor ultimately needs to go to a lender, right, for any kind of infrastructure project. And as was pointed out here, there is a lot of gestation period between a plan to an execution and it becoming reality. So our PPP policy had been there for a while. What has happened in more recent times is the vision document. So in India has a vision document right up to 2047. And that's the kind of vision one needs to have, I think. And that very clearly sets out where we need to go. And I don't think in India we're just looking at TAT, like turnaround time, capacity building and all. We're now at the level where we are talking about sustainable development, right? So I'll elaborate a little bit more later. But as I would like to reiterate, I think it's very important to have a long-term vision. Out of that long-term vision, a good set of policies, and obviously the policies need to continue for a while. Any kind of infrastructure project, like a port project, you're talking of not only a gestation period between planning and this thing, but also a return coming back to the investor over a longish period of time. Typically, concessions in our country are around 30 years, some of them are 50 years, and that's needed. That's needed. So that kind of a vision is also needed to be able to last that 30 or the 50 years, or do course corrections along the way through policies. So we've had what we call our Amritkal vision. We've had Sagarmala, which is another very interesting this thing. I'm not very sure how it will be relevant to the Sri Lankan context, but as I said, that's for you all to decide. But the Sagarmala project essentially talks about port-led industrialization, right? So it essentially says that the port is just but a ways to the means. It's not the end of the everything, right? The port is a gateway. The gate needs to open out into something, and that's an industrial zone or an industrial park. In your country, you have the SEZs. We've had a very mixed bag with SEZs. We're trying to get a proper SEZ policy together. But as yet, because of our structure of our government, it makes it that much more difficult because there are certain subjects which are state subjects, there are certain subjects which are central subjects. But this, and nobody likes to lose revenue, right? So the SEZ essentially says that you would tend to lose revenue. So we are having a little this thing there, but this port-led industrialization has been quite a good move. And that is something which says that have a port every 200 to 300 kilometers along the large coastline that we have. You have a few megaports, but you also have a lot of ports. The second thrust that has been there is through getting a very holistic view of the overall logistics. In India, our logistics is EXIM logistics originating or coming into India. It is not as much on transshipment alone, right? So there is a vital difference. So therefore, the hinterland becomes very important, and connectivity into that hinterland is very important. And that connectivity comes through road and rail networks, right? So we have what we call the dedicated freight corridors. We've got national highways, which are now improving dramatically. We have inland container depots, which are connected through this thing. So this end-to-end logistics, and if you all would have also noticed that most of the shipping lines are no longer restricting themselves to being just shipping lines and just sticking to the maritime leg, right? All of them have moved to becoming terminal operators. All of them have moved towards becoming rail operators, and that's becoming the ultimate key to the success. In many countries, they tie up with a local partner to do that because every country has its own nuances, right? So it will be different in Africa, quite different in India, I'm sure quite different in Sri Lanka too. So, and the third leg has been a lot of movement around digitization and the use of AI. So to be able to move away the bottlenecks, I would say man-made bottlenecks of the paper system and all that, the idea is to make it more transparent, put it on a digital thing. There is a response time set in, and if there is a response time not done by a particular officer who's dealing with it, it automatically moves to his supervisor, right? So it's, I mean, there is no rocket science. In today's technology, these are very easily done. And if you put in AI to it, which hasn't yet been done, because, well, AI can be a bit of a tiger, which is difficult to ride, but, well, digitization has been successful. We had a very robust port community system. It is now being renamed under our logistics policy and being subsumed into that, and which is a good thing, because it is not that maritime is treated differently, rail is treated differently, and the road is treated differently, different ministries, but they've managed to get it all together. And the overall idea is to be able to lower the cost of logistics in the overall ease of doing business. And logistics is always a cost in any level of business. So to that extent, these, I think, are this thing. The fourth thing that I would like to touch upon is, and I can elaborate on anything if you want me to, is creating a sustainable port. So decarbonization, electrification, digitization, use of renewable energy sources. These have become now the thrust area. So it's like we nowadays get calls not about how many cranes are coming in or what about this thing. We get calls from port chairmen about how do we set up a sludge disposal system? You know, how do we increase our renewable energy? This thing. So this has become now the buzzword, and we are trying to move to those levels of the European countries where sustainability is, and they have gone to a level beyond sustainability. They call it circularity, right? And those are the levels we should be aspiring to. And this is, I mean,
Thank you.
this is in short. But,
Thanks. Also, Tamal, what are the key priorities for India in the port and logistics sector, especially in terms of supporting the EXIM community, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of CFSs, inland depot operations?
Right. So it is essentially to support the community. The whole thing is about ease of doing the logistics, right? And lowering the cost of logistics. For that, one of the first things is that we are working towards a digital marketplace. We call it the National Logistics Portal, which, as I was telling you, includes trucking, warehousing. The railway, of course, is still outside it, but it includes trucking, warehousing, and the port community. Our rail goods booking and everything is also digitized. However, it's as yet outside the NLP. So we're trying to reduce all the inefficiencies in the business. The second thing is the paperwork part of it. So this particular NLP is not just an information platform. It is an actual platform where you can do business, you can transact business, you can exchange papers, you can pay money. So it's a secure platform. I think that's one of the key elements of being able to, in a more holistic manner, be able to support the EXIM community and trade. The other thing is, of course, creating industrial zones in and around ports, or if not in and around ports, giving extremely good connectivity, even if they are far inland, because as you know, all of India, because of our geography, is not necessarily close to a port. A very significant and a very productive part is quite far away from the ports. But today there are double stack trains running through dedicated freight corridors and doing extremely well there. And so again, on the rail side, they have started the hub and spoke. So the double stack trains, which are not just double stack, but double length. So as opposed to an original train in India carrying 90 containers, they do 360 containers, right? And they're moving it up to a central location, and then they're getting distributed the last 200, 300 kilometers, again by rail. We are at the point in Jaimbakshi where we are at the point we're doing the last mile delivery by truck, the 50, 60, 200 kilometer delivery through electric trucks. Right, so e-trucks, because e-trucks, unfortunately, e-trucks cannot do long haul as yet. The technology doesn't exist. But we're moving towards that. So all of this allows not only the logistics cost to be lowered, the time to be reduced, and more significantly, and in the world going forward, where you will need to be green tagged. Right? So the green tagging is also becoming a very important part to be able to export into the Western markets.
Thanks, Tamal. Damita, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Basically, I'll be discussing about the regional energy cooperation, especially in the Southeast Asia or South Asia, and also the role renewable energy play in the economic development of Sri Lanka and also in the region. So basically, both countries, Sri Lanka and India, are embarking on a very aggressive renewable energy strategy, where Sri Lanka is targeting 70% of electricity energy by 2030 from renewable energy, whereas India is targeting 500 gigawatts, a huge amount, from renewable energy by 2030. Meanwhile, both countries have been engaged in the India-Sri Lanka interconnection for more than 2 decades now, and we are very much closer, both countries are very much closer to finalizing the agreements on that. So I have with me today Karma Shering, he's from Bhutan, and Dr. Pradeep Pereira. With Karma, I will start on the topic of regional cooperation. So can you provide, because Bhutan and India, you have a very good regional cooperation of electrical energy or energy between India and Bhutan. Can you provide an overview of India-Bhutan regional cooperation, highlighting some key factors which contributed to the success of the cooperation? Over to you, Karma. He's joining on Zoom.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Amita, and of course, the esteemed panel members, the August gathering over there, and of course, the astute 2 panelists on the dais. A very good afternoon from Bhutan, Thimphu, Bhutan. My name is Karma Seong. I think Damita called me Sering, but there's another Sering, so don't confuse with another Sering. You can call me Seong for short Karma. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the Verité Research and the organizers in Colombo for giving us this opportunity to speak at this important forum, and to, of course, share some perspectives about the successful cooperation that we are having with the government of India. So I must share here that whatever I'm going to say is entirely of mine, and it doesn't necessarily reflect the situation between the two countries or that of my department, but definitely I'm going to share what is existing and how we are going through in terms of our cooperation in hydropower and energy development per se is concerned. So with this, let me just share some perspectives on how Bhutan is situated to take up this cooperation with the government of India. And I hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, thank you. And I must first give a short background about my country. You all know that Bhutan is a small landlocked country wedged between China in the north and India on the south, and therefore it is a rugged and mountainous country with lots of rivers and streams that are flowing largely from north and south. And essentially these rivers have provided us an advantage in terms of, making itself available for harnessing of the water power, which we call it electrical energy or hydropower power. And then the elevation that ranges from our southern foothills to the northern is about 150 meters to 7,500 meters within a short range of 150 kilometers from north to south and 300 kilometers from east to west. So within this expanse, we have the entire hydropower potential, which we have assessed it at about 33,000 megawatts of hydropower potential that is available for harnessing for us. And that is primarily because of the not only the rugged terrain, but the environmental policies that Bhutan has pursued till now, and the growth philosophy, which is essentially the gross national happiness philosophy that puts in front the environmental preservation as the key aspect of this growth philosophy, or the green growth philosophy, which we call it nowadays. And so therefore, given this, I must share here that we have 70% of the forest cover as of today. And we are mandated by our constitution to keep 60% of it for all times to come, that thereby ensuring the intergenerational equity for the country. So with this, we have ensured that the hydropower potential that is there within the country will remain sustainable, and then it will be there for quite some time to come, provided the climate change impacts doesn't take a toll on this very important resource for our country. So with this background, and given the natural resource endowment that Bhutan has in terms of the hydropower, it has become a natural choice between the two countries, Bhutan and India, to take up this resource harnessing together for the benefit of the two countries, mainly to serve each other's purpose of achieving energy security, and of course that comes along together with the development of hydropower, the connectivity between the countries, the regional trade in electricity, and then of course ensuring that it helps in the energy transition within the two or among the two countries. So with this, the hydropower cooperation between the two countries started from 1961, as it has been mentioned in the note also. And I must say that hydropower started with construction of small and mini hydropower projects in 1967. And that was the cooperation that started with the government of India, providing both technical and financial support to ensure the success of these small hydropower projects. And then come 1970s and 80s, during which we have then embarked on the construction of the first mega hydropower project in Bhutan, or in today's terms, it is the medium hydropower project, the 336 megawatt Chukha project that has been constructed. And it was constructed in such a way that it has been an exemplary example for the two countries in the cooperation of hydropower projects. And that has further scaled up to the construction of additional hydropower projects, which is the 1,020 megawatt Tala project from 1995 or 96 to 2006 or 7, during which it got commissioned. Then from there on, we had a series of other mega hydropower projects like 1,200 megawatt Punasangchu 1, then 1,020 megawatt Punasangchu 2, then 720 megawatt Mangdichu, etc., and so on. So with this, these are all possible because of the government of India providing the necessary technical, financial, human resource, and the institutional support that the government of India has provided over the last six decades or so. So therefore, not only this, these supports, the institutional supports mainly that Bhutan received are through its technical agencies in India. For instance, they have the central agencies like Central Electricity Authority, the Central Water Commission. Then they have this Central Water and Power Research Station in Pune. Then they have the Geological Survey of India, to name a few. Besides the other PSUs like NHPC, PTC, VAPCOS, and SJVNL, THTC, et cetera, and so on. So all these agencies have been quite forthcoming in terms of providing the capacity development for Bhutan, in terms of undertaking DPRs, in terms of providing design and engineering consultancies, and in terms of providing technologies. And that was it in terms of the mega hydropower projects are concerned. But given the growing situation of demand and supply in the country, we have also now found out that there's need to expand further the cooperation with India. So therefore, our policies have been reviewed, and then to see that there should be greater cooperation, not only between the two governments, but between the private sector as well. Bhutan has also tested this private sector engagement in the form of PPP since 2008 as well. And of course, it has done well with the engagement of Tata Power, with certain shareholding in one of the, I must say, the 126 megawatt Takachu project. So there, being such a successful one, we have now thought that we must wean away from the intergovernmental arrangements and see that we engage more with the private sector. And private sector, we say private sector primarily because they're able to leverage on finance, on technology, in terms of human resource capacity, and of course, the market access. The market access being the primary thing for us, because Bhutan, with the existing hydropower projects, we have so much surplus, which we need to find market in India. And so therefore, coordination or cooperation with the private sector is the key for us, besides the government, which is essentially for the existing hydropower projects as far as the two governments are concerned. But moving forward, we wanted to further engage in other renewable energy sources also, and for which Government of India is also helping Bhutan in terms of providing access to finance, in terms of providing technologies, and we have the International Solar Alliance in New Delhi that is also helping us to provide with various pilot schemes or pilot projects, and that will go a long way in terms of harnessing our renewable energy. So having said this, I must share here that till now, Bhutan has been able to export about 70% of its hydropower to India. And through it, Bhutan gets revenues from the export of hydropower, while at the same time, there has been clean energy availability for India. So this cooperation has been a unique one and a win-win cooperation between the two countries. And all these things are possible because of the mutual cooperation that is there, strong and mutual cooperation that is there between the two governments and between the two sectors in terms of energy sectors of the two countries. And I must also share here that the PPP route that we have taken more aggressively now is also ushering into a similar kind of a cooperation with the private sector, where now we have entered into MOUs with Tata Power of India. We have entered into MOU with Adani, and we have entered into MOU with Reliance. So these facets of cooperation is further going to deepen between the two countries, and therefore help Bhutan in not only achieving its energy security, but also ensuring that India gets some clean power in the times to come. So therefore, what has gone till now into the cooperation that, the successful cooperation between Bhutan and India is primarily that the projects that we are constructing in Bhutan has been constructed in a cost-effective manner. I think that is the key thing between the two countries. For Bhutan, we have been able to construct hydropower projects at a cost less than $1 million per megawatt. So that has been the key factor between the two countries. And then followed by, of course, strong mutual and win-win cooperation between the two countries in terms of harnessing this critical resource, and that is also clean and renewable energy. So I must share here that this cooperation is on an expansion mode, and as we move along into the future, we have tweaked our policies to ensure that we expand beyond the intergovernmental governmental partnership. Of course, not ruling out the intergovernmental partnership, but to also engage on a greater scale with the private sector of India, which can provide further impetus to the growth of hydropower sector in this country. So with this, I'll keep a stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. So you stated that the India-Bhutan regional cooperation is beneficial to both countries. So, and you are expanding on that. So let me pose you the second question, that if you, can you elaborate on the lessons that Sri Lanka could learn from India-Bhutan cooperation? You may highlight on the interconnection agreements and the other lessons that Sri Lanka can learn from Bhutan when we are moving forward with the regional cooperation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Damita. And here, I think there are a couple of things where we can see common ground. First of all, it is the partnership that we must try to have with the government of India, the strong partnership, the mutual partnership, which will be a win-win for both the countries, based on mutual trust and understanding. And of course, we must have certain resources that are there for both of us to explore and benefit from. So I think that is the key aspect of the cooperation if you want to have a win-win situation. For Bhutan, hydropower has been the key resource on which we have started our cooperation, and we are deepening this cooperation further. And the other one is that Bhutan doesn't have that much of financial resources. So India is such a large country, which is just at the doorstep. We need to harness and see how best we can avail the facilities that are there in India. And that will be possible through continuous dialogue and continuous consultations with not only at the government level, but at the private sector level also. So that will further enable the investments that are going to come into your country. So that dialogue needs to be kept continuing until we achieve our shared objectives. And of course, the other thing is that the interconnection, as you said, the interconnection is also very important. And of course, the earlier speakers mentioned that Sri Lanka has taken some decades to work on it and still working on it. But I think there is need for us to fast track on this. What Bhutan did is that we had fast tracked the construction of cross-border transmission lines in the first place through preparation of the master plans, through preparation of the roadmaps. And we have identified which projects are meant for export and which projects are meant for in-house consumption in Bhutan. So with that kind of roadmap and with that kind of master plans, I think it enables both countries to have a common understanding of where are our priorities. So therefore, I think it is important that we come to a common consensus as to when and how we need to do it. And I suppose for Sri Lanka, it's a challenge because the distance between India and Sri Lanka may be quite huge, quite far, but then we could always tap upon the international development finance, multilateral development banks to get soft financing or blended financing to fast track this project. And without fast tracking, I'm not too sure that we can achieve that objective of interlinking or interconnecting Indian power grid and Sri Lanka's power grid. For Bhutan, definitely this interconnection has been a boon to Bhutan because we are able to supply the surplus power to India. And even during the winter months, when we are facing the shortages, we are able to bring in or import power from India. And so therefore, we are benefiting on both the sides. During the surplus time, we export to India, which is during the high demand season. And when there is a lean season in India, when there is adequate generation, Bhutan has a high demand. So therefore, there is this complementarity is always there between the two economies. So that kind of, complementarities, I think we need to harness. And definitely, by riding on the Indian wave, we are definitely going to, the neighbors, especially the other smaller neighbors, are going to benefit from the way the India is rising.
Thank you, Karma. Now I turn to Pradeep to discuss on the renewable energy and the regional cooperation. Pradeep, can you elaborate on the key areas in which Sri Lanka and India can collaborate on the renewable energy? Also elaborate on the benefits that Sri Lanka can get through such cooperation.
Thank you very much, and I also would like to thank Verité Research for inviting me for this panel discussion. I first would like to say that whatever the remarks that I am doing here are on my personal capacity, and it doesn't reflect the previous organization that I used to work for, including the government. So basically, we can learn a lot from India in terms of the renewable energy development. So 10 years ago, I think India had power shortages. I think it was quite common, I think, for India to have power shortages that time. But during last 10 years, I think India had made tremendous strides, I think, in addressing its power sector issues. So today, I think India has installed capacity of something around 450 gigawatts, or close to 500 gigawatts. I mean, if you compare that with Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka has installed capacity of close to 5 gigawatts. So India is basically 100 times bigger than us in terms of the power sector. And the renewable energy installed capacity is now more than 200 gigawatts out of this 500 gigawatts. So it's not 500, I think renewable energy probably is about 45% of the total installed capacity. So let's say the installed capacity is around 450 gigawatts. Renewable energy constitute close to half of that. Now India has set a target of achieving 500 gigawatts by 2030, and they are well on course to achieve that. And this renewable energy capacity additions has come at a very affordable price. That's the difference. Now India is getting solar energy at around 3 Indian rupees, which is about 10 Sri Lankan rupees. And India is getting wind energy at about 3 Indian rupees 50 paisa, which is about 12 to 13 Sri Lankan rupees. These are the tariffs India is getting. Why? How they are getting these tariffs? They are getting these tariffs through competitive bidding. And they have perfected the renewable energy procurement arrangements. So they have developed this solar park model, or the renewable energy park model, where all the projects are undertaken by the private sector, where the government facilitates these projects by providing all the infrastructure, including the land acquisition, transmission, connectivity, everything. So from the investor's point of view, the projects are completely de-risked. When you bid for the project, you know what you are bidding for, and once you win the tender, you can deliver the project within a year. So you don't need to go around getting asked, looking for this approval or that approval. And once you get the project, once you win the tender, you know how to, what to do. And also they have this, what is called reverse auctions, where the bidding for these projects are undertaken on an electronic platform, and the bidders are supposed to compete online until all the bidders sort of walk away and the prices keep on coming down. And that kind of a procurement arrangement has enabled India to achieve this kind of tariffs. Now in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, we are still talking about feed-in tariffs, which is administratively established tariff by a set of bureaucrats without any market competition. Now, I think these are the kind of things that we can learn from India. And now I think India is also going for energy storage in big time. So when you have more and more renewable energy, you need energy storage. So they have various kind of hybrid projects that are being tendered now. They have this firm renewable capacity, renewable projects firm, where the project is for a hybrid solution consisting of both renewable energy plus energy storage solution. So even the peak time energy during the night time can also be provided by these renewable energy projects. And they have different tariffs for different time slabs, I think. So these kind of innovations they have achieved. And at the same time, India is also going ahead with the digitalization of electricity sector. They are installing smart meters through public-private partnerships. So the meter installation and meter management is undertaken by the private sector. And that enable digital utility services to be provided, like demand response, prosumers, solar integration. All those things are facilitated through these smart platforms, and they can be, and these services are offered by private sector IT companies who are collaborating with the Indian utilities, state-owned utilities, in providing this kind of value-added solutions. So these are some of the things that we can learn from Indian experience. From a soft side, I think that is basically lessons learned, lessons that we can learn from India. But when it comes to economic benefits from what is been happening in India, we need to have a physical interconnection with India. Now, that is where the problem is. I think the previous speaker mentioned about the advantages that the Bhutan has achieved through this physical interconnections that they have had. But unfortunately, we, as Damita mentioned, we have been discussing this for the last 20 years, and we don't know when it is going to happen. So I think there are a little bit of complications, I think, in our situation compared to Bhutan, because Bhutan, Nepal, and Bangladesh shares land borders with India. And as a result, the cost of interconnection is relatively less. But in Sri Lanka's case, we have the Fork Strait between us. So if we are to have an interconnection, I think the recent estimates are it would cost about $1 billion. So this investment need to be recovered through the economic returns of this interconnection. And also the questions of how this investment is to be funded, who should borrow, who should bear the cost of servicing this investment, those need to be discussed and agreed, depending on who is going to benefit from this interconnection. Now, I think those are the kind of issues that kind of prevented or delayed the finalization of this interconnection between Sri Lanka and India. I used to work at ADB, and we used to support Sri Lanka and India to come to an agreement on how to structure this investment, but unfortunately, we could not achieve that consensus up to now. So basically, the issue is that if we are to have this interconnection today, Sri Lanka is the country which is going to import energy. The cost difference in electricity sector is as such. India is not going to import power from Sri Lanka under today's prices, because India's cost of generation is much cheaper than ours. There are several reasons for that. If you take the economies of scale, India has economies of scale when it comes to large-scale projects, which we don't have in Sri Lanka. And then the issue is India also has their own fossil fuel resources, coal power, coal. So the domestic coal is, in India's case, domestic coal is much cheaper than what Sri Lanka has to pay for imported coal. And that gives an advantage when it comes to coal-based power. And then India also has access to, let's say, hydropower from Bhutan, which they have invested in Bhutan hydropower projects, and they are getting relatively cheap hydropower coming from Bhutan to India and maybe from other countries. And also the renewable energy also in India's case is much cheaper than ours, because they are getting renewable energy at a competitive price. So due to these reasons, India's cost of electricity is, at the moment, I think average cost of generation in India is below 5 Indian rupees, which is something around 15 Sri Lankan rupees, 15, 16 Sri Lankan rupees, whereas ours is much higher than that. So if we are to have an interconnection with India, the probability is that Sri Lanka would be the importing country. So if Sri Lanka is going to be the importing country, who should pay for this interconnection? So the basic logic is that Sri Lanka has to pay for that. And then the price arbitrage between the two countries should pay for this difference. So for instance, if the cost difference is, let's say, 5 rupees, that should cover the cost of transmission. That's the basic economics. Now, if we do that, and then also the volume of energy trade between the two countries should be able to pay for the cost of servicing the investment that had been made for the interconnection. So those are the kind of issues. So we have to work out how that can be done and whether there's an economic case for that. So hopefully, if that consensus can be reached, I think this project can be implemented. But I think before coming to this interconnection, I think there are a lot of cooperation and collaboration that can happen between India and Sri Lanka. But this interconnection project, even if we start serious discussions today, it might take about 6 to 7 years to materialize. So before that, I think we can seriously collaborate with India in getting our power market reforms done. So Sri Lanka is embarking on power sector reforms. We have to have a new institutional structures for power sector, the regulatory framework. The regulator is sitting next to me, and then all the soft aspects of reformed power sector has to be put in place. So India had gone through this experience maybe 20 years ago. So there are a lot we can learn from them. So that kind of support, and also in the case of renewable energy development, renewable energy procurement, renewable energy integration. So we are having issues in integrating large amount of renewable energy. So we can learn from Indian experience. So there are a lot of that kind of support that we can have in the interim. But to achieve the full potential, we have to have a physical interconnection. And that, I think, there are certain technical as well as economical issues. Those, I think, need to be addressed to achieve that.
Thank you, Pradeep. Pradeep has also highlighted the challenges that we might face and some of the things that we can do to overcome the challenges. Now I will hand over to Dashma to continue on the other.
Just on the energy side, one question that came to my mind is that IMO's target for net zero in greenhouse gas emission, etc. How prepared are we as a port? Maybe I'll pose that question to Romesh. How prepared are we as a port and also as a country towards that endeavor?
Thanks, Dash. I think we are woefully unprepared. We have not even begun, we've just begun to talk about it. But there are some very concrete and easy steps or quick steps that we should take. I think with a bias for action is most important. So there is actually a very interesting nexus between Sri Lanka's obligations under our net zero goal of 2050 net zero goal and the IMO's phased targets for achieving net zero in the shipping industry, shipping and maritime industry. So we have an obligation to meet by 2030, by 2040, and of course 2050. And Sri Lanka has the ability or the potential to leapfrog in terms of meeting those obligations, leapfrog some of the other countries because of the likely availability of renewable energy that can very easily be kind of conjoined with the need for green energy in the port. Now this is, but this requires obviously regulators to think outside the box. There was some deregulation in the act, but the port earns in hard currency. It is a good base to build a project that can actually green all the electricity that comes into the port. It is one of the few areas that is kind of a community of its own. The power is also well distributed. It comes to a central point, so you can easily tag a renewable project onto the ports. And the port's energy requirements for the next 15 years, based on our projections, are clearly known. So I think there's a great opportunity there to bring these two together. Sri Lanka gets a big leg up in terms of maybe 200 to 300 or even 500 megawatt project, renewable energy project that is underwritten by guaranteed revenue streams, guaranteed offtake from the port. And we also then give a platform to tap into harvesting some of this renewable energy that is unused. Because let's be very clear, we have obligations by 2030 to reduce our emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in the port by 70%, by 40% under IMO obligations. Now that means large-scale electrification That means provision of power to ships that are in the port. That means significant investment, and the government should not be the one who's going to invest in this, because these are all potentially commercializable projects. So I think that's an area that we can do. So if I take our company, we started 8 years ago, moving into hybrids, moving into solar, looking at how we reduce our energy consumption by patterns. But I think as a port, we need to have there's no point one terminal being green. There needs to be a concrete plan to have a completely use of green energy in the port.
Yeah, I would like to actually ask Pradeep to further elaborate on the challenges that the two countries might face in this energy cooperation, and what can the two countries do to mitigate the negative effects, if there are any?
Yeah, I think before that, I think I would also like to add to the remarks of the previous speaker, because under the new Electricity Act, what we have allowed is what is called the open access provisions. Now, under open access provisions, entity like port can invest or enter into a contract with the renewable energy generator, which is located somewhere in a renewable energy friendly area, either solar or wind or a combination of that, and use the transmission network to transmit that power to meet your demand. So you have the choice of buying from your chosen generator in a chosen type of energy to meet your requirements. That is allowed under the new Electricity Act. It needs to be enabled through a regulation. So there's a specific time frame, I think, specified in the Act, I think 1 year or something like that, to issue that regulation. So under that, you can sort of basically bring renewable energy from a renewable energy developer, or you can go and invest somewhere, and you will have to pay an open access charge to the transmission and distribution licensees, which would be the CB successor entities. Now, for instance, in India, they are already having this kind of facilities. So I was involved in a project for Delhi Metro. So Delhi Metro invested in purchasing electricity from a large solar park in Madhya Pradesh, which is more than 1,000 kilometers away from Delhi, and they're bringing the transmission from there. And now, for instance, the Indian Railways are committed to have carbon zero by 2030. So they are investing in large-scale renewable energy projects and using this open access provision. So these are some kind of lessons that we can learn from India. So coming back to, because I saw that there was another question about the barriers to renewable India-Sri Lanka integration. I think I alluded to some of that in my previous remarks, but I think the main issue is Sri Lanka also has to decide how our power sector should evolve over the next 20, 30 years. So if we are going to have interconnection with India, that would require a substantial investment of $1 billion or something like that. And then there are certain other technologies that have been talked about might not be possible. So we have to decide what we are going to do. I mean, we are talking about LNG terminal, we are talking about a nuclear power plant, we are talking about India-Sri Lanka interconnection. Whether we can have all these. So Sri Lanka is a relatively small country with a relatively small energy market. I think our demand at the moment, including the solar rooftop generation, peak demand is something around 4 gigawatt, and the generation is about 20 terawatt hours. Now, if you take India, India's generation capacity is, as I mentioned earlier, more than 100 times bigger than that. So do we have space to have all these technologies here? So what is the most optimum kind of trajectory that we should have? That kind of clarity has to be there. So when we talk about all these things, it is difficult for us to decide on one or the other. I think that's probably why these decisions are taking time. So that I mean, once we decide on a particular trajectory, we have to follow that. So you can't invest in, or you can decide to, or you can have negotiations with India for a India-Sri Lanka interconnection. At the same time, you can't be talking about a LNG terminal or a nuclear power plant. So these are mutually exclusive for a small country. I think that's the issue. Other thing is, I think we also have this offshore wind potential off the coast of northern province. And this resource is too big for Sri Lanka to consume by ourselves. So we have to develop that in a similar manner. Bhutan has developed their hydropower resource. So Bhutan's hydropower resource was too big for Bhutan to develop and exploit. So Bhutan has decided that they would offer it as a regional resource, and they have obtained the resources from India to develop it, and they are exporting most of their renewable power to India. So if Sri Lanka is to develop our offshore wind resources, which is, I suppose, is about 5 to 10 gigawatts, and at this current level of demand in Sri Lanka, there's no way that we could absorb that. So it has to be developed as a regional resource together with India. By doing that, we can also share the logistic facilities, the port facilities that are required for offshore wind power development, and then export bulk of that renewable energy back to India. So that, and then we can earn some royalties or whatever through that. So that is how Bhutan has developed their hydropower. I think this is potentially the way that we could think of developing the offshore wind power resource in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, thank you, Pradeep. Now we can take some questions from the audience. The floor is open for you to ask any questions, make any remarks or comments. Yes, Dr. Harsh.
Thanks. Given there's a lot of talk about the Adani project, etc., and the planned rolling back of the reforms, Pradeep, you know, the whole transmission license story, and the recent reduction of tariffs for renewable energy and shutting off plants on Sundays, reducing the tariff, and also the third combined cycle plant that is coming. There's a lot of talk that the pricing is wrong. Can you give us some context and give us your thoughts as a professional in this industry, in the region, how we should approach this?
So I think it's a rather loaded question. And yeah, I mean, because I can only speak in my personal capacity, I haven't seen the final version of the whatever the amendment that is going to be done for the Electricity Act. So I cannot comment on it without seeing that. So I don't know whether the reforms are going to be rolled back or not. Probably it would not. So I think let's wait and see what the final version of any amendment to that would be. So at this stage, it's not clear. Now, I think as far as the Adani project is concerned, I think it's a decision made by the investor itself, and it's their own decision. That's all I can say. This is what I have seen in the papers. I am not part of any discussions with that. Now, the renewable energy tariff reduction, I think probably Damita is at a better position to comment on it than me, because it's a kind of a pricing issue. As I was telling, I think earlier, the renewable energy, we need to go for a competitive procurement. I think if we are to depend on administrators or bureaucrats setting tariff, we would keep on having these kind of issues. So sooner we would adopt a competitive tendering for renewable energy, we can avoid these kind of controversial decisions where somebody or some person or some committee decide on what should be the return on equity, what should be the cost of finance on behalf of the investors who are making these investment decisions. So let the investors make those decisions and let them bid for that, and whoever who bid less get the project. So I think that's the market-based system that we should adapt rather than administratively setting these tariffs. So that's my take on that. I hope I answered your questions.
I think there's another interesting opportunity in terms of the intersection of the maritime and the power sector in Sri Lanka. Because if you look at about 98% of the order book of new ships are all dual fuel capable. And these are each of these vessels, the bigger vessels are $250 million, $260, $250 million vessels. And all of them are being designed. If you take a cost of a ship, today is $100 million more than it was 4 years ago, simply because the engine technology is designed now. The engines are designed to take dual fuels with the aim of all moving to a green fuel over the lifetime of those vessels. Now, green fuels that are in play today are in terms of the maritime sector are threefold. One is green ammonia, the other is green hydrogen, and green methanol. All of these are essentially derivable from renewable energy. Now, Sri Lanka, I think, Pradeep, you said was 3 to 4 gigawatts. I think that is a very low estimation of from what I have heard. Our land-based wind resources are likely to be in the range of 25 to 30 gigawatts. I don't know whether that's true. And with at least a similar amount potentially offshore. So we are talking of, numbers of an order of magnitude that are 20, 30 times what Sri Lanka will ever need. And this represents a huge economic opportunity for us to move from being a net exporter of energy to a net importer of energy to an exporter of energy purely based on maritime fuel. I know that Singapore is today the Port of Singapore is looking to import green hydrogen as a feedstock for green fuel from anywhere in the world. They're willing to buy Sri Lanka's green fuel, green hydrogen as well. They're willing to set up plants here to convert that. Now, for us, with the pipeline of port capacity that we have going, converting to adding, one of our biggest drawbacks has been that we have not been a bunkering hub because we have to import bunkers. Now, we have this opportunity sitting in front of us that can be developed over the next 10 years to actually turn into a green fuel bunkering hub. Now this is the kind of intersection and the type of policy that requires, exactly as you said, it should not be regulators sitting and deciding how much power should cost, but a market-based system that then leaves space for all these, for investment in all these areas.
Yeah, I think as far as the green hydrogen is concerned, I think Sri Lanka, although you have mentioned that 25,000 gigawatts, I think we have a limited land availability in this country. So I don't know exactly how much land can be allocated for renewable energy, especially onshore. Yeah. So because we are a fairly densely populated country, same with India. So I think we have to make an assessment how much land. I think meeting our domestic energy demand with renewable energy, I don't think an issue. But going beyond as an energy exporter, then we have to compete with countries like Australia with huge amount of land, maybe Middle Eastern countries with deserts. So these kind of countries have a competitive advantage over us when it comes to renewable energy exports. I think we would have an advantage in offshore wind because our offshore wind resources are very good. But the problem is that the offshore wind cost is at the moment still is a bit high. So hopefully it will come down with the technology development, but it has to be undertaken at a scale. You can't add a few hundred megawatts here and there for offshore wind. You have to go for gigawatt scale offshore wind development, like 5 to 10 gigawatts, which is possible in the Fork Strait, but it has to be undertaken jointly with India, because there's no point in Sri Lanka developing its own piece and India developing its own piece. So it has to be done as a joint project. I think this is a project somewhere around $10–15 billion investment kind of a project, and where you need to have a dedicated port for that. You have to have you have to have some expertise in offshore construction activities, which is available in the oil industry. So those kind of technologies has to be brought in, and it has to be undertaken jointly. And that would enable us to develop green hydrogen and green ammonia, obviously. So that can be used in the ships as well as in the domestic industry.
If I may add, you might be aware that Tuticorin port is actually, and the whole region of Tuticorin, is being developed as a green hub for green hydrogen, renewable energy, and things. And a lot of investments have flown in. And that port is very well situated for.
Yeah, in fact, I remember when I was working in India, a Danish company came and did a study, and they identified Tuticorin port as the hub for green offshore wind development
Yes.
in the Fox Strait.
And in present times, there is a lot of investment coming in at the back end.
Yeah, they also concluded Fox Strait has better wind resources than, let's say, North Sea in Europe.
Yes.
So if it can be done, I think, but it has to be done at a scale.
It has to be done at a scale. There's no question about it.
Any more questions from the audience? Any more comments? We have another 2-3 minutes. We can take one question more. Okay, in the absence of any more questions from the audience, we can draw this panel discussion to a close. If Rashma has any more things to be added.
Yeah, so maybe in closing, if each panelist can give like a 30-second wrap-up, or if not, we can just end. Ramesh, you have anything to say? Please.
One final comment.
I'm not used to having the last word, so I'll but I think, you know, if I can say anything, it's about the fact that Sri Lanka has always had a bipartisan ambition to be a maritime hub. Unfortunately, that ambition, which is expressed by all political parties, has had multiple ways of being put into action, and that has resulted in paralysis over the last 25 years, or inopportune development. So I think what is needed, like whether it is electricity, whether it is renewables, whether it is logistics, whether it is finance, you know, taxation, whether it is maritime and port development, is a consistent plan that has bipartisan and universal acceptance, because these are things that are of national value. They can't change the method of implementation maybe, but the whole process, the objectives, I think, need to get agreed on by everyone. We had recently a great example of this that was made at a World Bank conference, where the opposition said that, the government said that they didn't pass any legislation on that particular development without getting bipartisan sign-off, even from the minor parties.
Yeah, I think a lot of interesting areas for collaboration and development in terms of maritime industry as well as the energy industry was expressed. And I think also in the morning, in some of the conversations, one was mentioned was about the importance of Africa and the fact that India's growth has a lot of ambition in terms of growing in Africa as well. Particularly Mozambique was mentioned, and particularly the East African coast. And some of the areas that we may actually not be really looking at from a Port of Colombo perspective is how do we become relevant to this East African coastal area, and the growth and the ambitions of India in terms of growing in Africa, I think, is a good impetus for the Port of Colombo to also look at how do we position ourselves as a hub for the African region as well. And also there's a conceptual in terms of, whilst we have a supply side increase on the shipping side, that probably over a period of time with decarbonization and the aging fleet will change to a more moderate balance in terms of supply demand, which would also mean that the hub and spoke mechanism might become more important, and actually you may have hub to hub kind of movement. Then we need to be able to stay relevant in that kind of context and look at the, what we all talk about for so long, how do we make it a reality? Yeah.
Thank you, Vish. Tamal, any closing remarks?
So I think I'll just carry on a little bit on this hub and spoke thing. From a geopolitical aspect, it's being predicted more and more that shipping from an international movement, like round the world movement, China to America movement, will more and more play within a regional zone. So it'll become more regional as we go along. And therefore, this region of the Indian Ocean region, which from the Gulf, the west coast of India, the East Africa, and all would be this thing, and Colombo sits at the heart of it, right? So you have a huge geographical advantage. And therefore, and sitting on the international lanes, the hub and spoke this thing. So probably looking at the Jafza model or the Dubai model may not be a bad idea. Some of those locations have outpriced themselves right now, and there is little scope for growth, either in Singapore or in Jafza. So that's one opportunity. I think the other opportunity, which again everybody's touched upon, is there could be a lot of collaboration along the renewable energy for the maritime sector. We have a policy called the Harit Sagar policy, and still at its infancy, but the policy is there, and the course is set, and mandates have been given. So pretty much it should get done. And if Sri Lanka can also see that if their policy can be aligned towards that, the technology and all that comes in with that scale of technology that will come in, the change of technology that will come in, could be well taken advantage of. Thank you.
May I invite Karma if there's any final remarks you can make?
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting discussion among the panel members. And of course, I tend to benefit a lot out of this discussion because I get first-hand information about Sri Lanka and its growth trajectory. From my side, nothing much of value, but just to share, again, some perspectives as far as the renewable energy development is concerned. I think very important that the government must initiate to have some master plans in terms of how you want to develop, no matter what would be the time frame that you want to achieve, but then there has to be some certain master plans and how you're going to achieve that by having some actionable plans in front of you in terms of how you're going to raise the financing, what sort of partnerships that you want to have. And then the other one is that just next door, you have a giant India, which is riding and which is rising at a faster pace than anyone else. And many people in the West speak of the India's growth. And they always want to take advantage of it. So therefore, I think neighbors like ourselves, we must also try to see how best to leverage from the India's growth and see that we have the necessary plans and programs, how best to take up together with India. Because I'm sure India will be power hungry in the times to come because it has to develop and it is on its trajectory to become the third largest economy or perhaps second largest economy in the times to come. So therefore, I think we must also gear up and better sail together than be left behind. So this is what I would like to share here. Thank you.
Yeah, I think regional cooperation in energy sector is a no-brainer. I think it always beneficial to everybody. So because especially in the energy sector, I think economies of scale matters. And for a small country, getting connected to a larger economy always helps us, because then we can achieve full potential of whatever the economies of scale that we can be exploited. And also, I think certain resources that we have in our country, like especially this offshore wind resource, has to be developed at a regional level. It cannot be developed only for the benefit of Sri Lanka. So if it is to be fully developed, we have to have that kind of connectivity. At the same time, when it comes to renewable energy has this, what is called intermittency. It fluctuates from time to time. And these fluctuations are local. So for instance, when we don't have sunlight in Sri Lanka, there may be sunlight in India, or vice versa. And when the wind blows here, they may not have wind there. So I think if once you are in a larger power system, it is much easier to balance your reserves. And you don't need to have the same amount of what is called reserve capacity as if you are an island kind of a network. So on that basis, I think we can cut down on our standby capacity that we need to maintain if we are connected to a larger country like India. So there are all kind of benefits, and so we need to, it has to be done. But I think we have to have clarity in mind how we are going to utilize this interconnection, whether we are going to use it for standby purposes, whether we are going to use for energy trading. So that means that we are going to import from India in the immediate future. Hopefully in the future, we might be able to export back when we can develop our offshore wind energy. And then what is going to happen to some of the expensive power plants that we already have here? They are going to be displaced by cheap power coming from India. So that is also another concern that need to be addressed. because we have entered into long-term power purchase agreements with some of these power plants. So, and some are still under consideration. So if there is going to be an interconnection, do we need them? And then we are also talking about these various fossil fuel-based energy sources, whether we need them if we are going to have interconnection with India. And then other issue is so the so-called sovereignty issue or the national security issue, especially with what is happening in other parts of the world. If we are going to depend on energy imports coming from a particular country, whether that is something that we can depend on, whether we need to still keep some reserve capacity to face certain eventualities that may happen due to various reasons in the future which we cannot predict today. So I think all these things need to be taken into account before we can take a decision on this matter. Thank you.
Somebody told me that time and tide waits for no man nor woman, and I think it's very important that we reach the potential soon. Also, it's interesting to know that while the world developing economies are expected to grow at I would say the world is expected to grow around 2 to 3%, and the developing and emerging economies are expected to grow at about maybe 5%. And here in India is expected to grow at 6% as per World Bank for 2025. And Sri Lanka is expected to grow at about 4%, and Bangladesh is expected to grow at 4%. But when we look at the intra-regional trade that is happening in these economies, it's a mere 5%. So there's a lot of potential. I think World Bank released a good publication in January saying half empty glass. So there is potential, and there is there has to be urgency in what we do as a nation and also as the region. And it's also interesting to know that while we talk about all this growth and trade and potential, 33% of the world's poor is in South Asia. So as the Deputy Minister articulated in the morning, while we talk about all this potential, and it's not just a numbers game, it's also about impacting lives and transforming communities. So on that note, I'd like to end this session, and thank you everyone for your time and the insights. Thank you. Thanks, Verité.
Thank you very much to our panelists. If you all could all remain seated for just a moment. Thank you to our panelists and moderators, and special thank you to Mr. Karma Shivan for joining us virtually. I would now like to invite Umar Rajamantri, Head of Communications at Verité Research, to come forward and present the tokens of appreciation to our panelists and moderators. Can I please ask for a round of applause for our moderator and panelist, Ms. Dashma Karunaratnam, Mr. Ramesh David, Mr. Vishwanath Dalawata, Mr. Tamal Roy, Dr. Pradeep Pereira, and Mr. Damita Kumar Singha. I kindly ask all our panelists if we can just take a group photo to capture this memorable moment. Yeah.
Hello, my name's Ashani, and I'm here to tell you about airquality.lk. There's very little research on air quality and its impact on our health, the environment and economy in Sri Lanka. However, globally, there's plenty of studies that indicate that air quality and poor air quality has a massive impact on our lives and our communities. So this ranges from our impacts on our respiratory health to mental health, productivity and more. So we'd really like Sri Lankans to start taking this problem more seriously and to help safeguard themselves. Airquality.lk is a platform that helps to build awareness on the risks of polluted air, help the public safeguard their health, and work towards driving policy reform that will help us clean up the air we breathe. Firstly, we have a live map that draws data from a sensor network which is across the country. And this will give you near real-time data and get an understanding of the air quality in your area. We also have an alert system that will give you an understanding of the changes to the air quality in your surrounding area. We're also working on a portal that will allow researchers and interested individuals to request historical data. As a first step, go check out our website and then go explore the map, see where all the air quality sensors are around the country, and then sign up to our alert system that'll help you take care of yourself and others. You can also be part of our cleaner air movement and help us grow the air quality sensor network, and by creating awareness among your family, friends, schools on the importance of managing and tracking air quality.